Last month, the Financial Times reported that members of the Tony Blair Institute, a think tank closely linked to Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party, had been present at the viewing of a slide deck outlining a post-genocide plan for Gaza. Put together by Boston Consulting Group in conjunction with Israeli businessmen, the so-called Great Trust Plan would see hundreds of thousands of Palestinians ethnically cleansed from the enclave, and American megacorporations invited to special economic zones, such as the cringe-worthily titled Elon Musk Smart Manufacturing Zone. The Tony Blair Institute staff were part of group chats with those developing the project, and at one stage, a document was submitted to the group by a TBI staff member. When pressed to comment on these allegations by the FT, a Tony Blair Institute representative said this: "Your story is categorically wrong. TBI was not involved in the preparation of the deck, which was a BCG deck, and had no input whatsoever into its contents." When the Financial Times presented the representative with evidence of involvement in the group chats and the documents submitted by the staffer, the TBI spokesperson responded, "We have never said that the TBI knew nothing about what this group was working on, or that they weren't on calls in which the group discussed their plans." Well, I mean, okay, sure, so you were part of the group who were doing these things. You knew these things were going. You knew the reality of those plans, and you didn't think it was worth telling anybody or crying foul about the reality or trying to influence. Like, the fact that you can be there alongside people where, as far as I'm aware, according to the FT, the Israeli businessman's plan, which again, this BCG slide deck, involved literally paying 500,000 Gazans to be ethnically cleansed from their own land. The trailer park boys went, "I'm going to give you $100 to go away." And it's fine, we're just going to ignore this. We're just going to keep this all quiet. But this is an ethnic cleansing plan. But then again, when did humanitarian issues ever feature in Tony Blair's interests? The desire of the TBI to be able to distance itself from the post-war plan for Gaza is no longer tenable, however. Last night, it was revealed that Tony Blair himself had been present at a meeting with President Trump and Jared Kushner to discuss the future of Gaza. According to Axios, who broke the story, Blair had also previously been meeting with Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and Palestinian Authority Premier Mahmoud Abbas to discuss the future plans. This is how Novara Media's own Ash Sarkar reacted to the story on BBC Newsnight, and I think she speaks for all of us here.
How significant is the fact that Tony Blair's involved in discussions about a post-war Gaza?
Well, I guess it's because Satan was unavailable. I mean, look, Tony Blair and the Tony Blair Institute, it's never met a despot whose money they didn't want to take. All right. So they did work with, the regime of Kazakhstan. They took their money. They've done all kinds of PR work for some really, really grubby individuals. And I see this as a complete continuity of it.
Tony Blair cannot get his grubby, blood-stained hands off of the Middle East. First it's Iraq, and then it's Lebanon. Then he's a Middle East envoy, and now he wants to try and be the savior of Gaza and the savior of the two-state solution. Nobody wants you, Tony. Nobody trusts you, Tony. And the fact that I'm sure people across the political spectrum, at the very least, were at least receptive to what Ash was saying there, should show you the strength of feeling about what people think of you getting involved, Tony, in whatever happens in Palestine and Israel in future. Go away. No one wants you there. Ash then went on to say this.
At this current summit in Washington, there is no Palestinian representative.
That's true.
So this is a series of talks involving Israel and Westerners. And if you're Palestinian, there is no reason why you should trust this at all, because the history for Palestinian people has been every time that they've been removed or displaced, they've never been allowed to come back. And that's been from 1947, 1948 onwards. And the only serious discussion about what a lasting ceasefire, a lasting peace and a lasting day one plan would look like would involve leverage. And it would involve saying, okay, Israel has to not just agree to a ceasefire, but stick to it this time, which they didn't do in March, because otherwise no more military aid, no more military support, no more reconnaissance flights, no more trade deals. We're not just going to sanction individual settlers, we're going to sanction settlement goods, and we're going to sanction Israeli goods as well. That's the only way you get them to move.
100% correct. 100% correct there from Ash. Like, the amount of strongly worded letters that we've had to deal with now, or strongly worded statements or joint statements going, this is intolerable, this is really, really bad. I mean, you can actually do something material, you know? You can actually, rather than just virtue signal about the individual settlers that you've sanctioned, or the woman from the Netflix video from Louis Theroux's documentary, and actually place real material consequences on Netanyahu, because that's all he listens to. all Netanyahu will respond to is might. I mean, he's very similar to Trump in that regard. I guess Trump is more easily bribed, I guess. But when it comes to Netanyahu, you must show a forceful response to force him by removing material support. I mean, the fact that we materially support a genocidal colonialist ethno-state in the Middle East for geopolitical reasons, despite them flagrantly violating international law with settlements and mowing the lawn even before October the 7th, is bad enough. Now there's an active genocide going on, the fact it's still going on, and we're still getting meetings of Western powers moving the chess pieces of the Middle East around without any representatives from the area as part of those talks, shows you how these people feel about the agency of the people in Palestine. Ash finished by highlighting something key that links Trump, Kushner, and Blair together.
I think the Jared Kushner element here is really, really important, because something that binds Donald Trump and Jared Kushner, as well as the ties of marriage and family, is an interest in real estate. And while I think that the Gaza Riviera plan is offensive, the idea that you can just displace a whole people and turn it into a holidays destination is disgusting. There is something which is consistent and already happening, which is in the United States, you do see these auctions and sell-offs of Palestinian land, what is under international law meant to be Palestinian land, to, interested parties in American real estate, particularly those who wish to settle, as part of the project of Jewish settlement of what they consider to be Greater Israel. So this is something which is already happening in some form, predominantly in the West Bank, and now they want to apply that to Gaza. So again, for me, this comes back to the central question of leverage, which is we know where the balance of Israeli opinion is, right? The balance of Israeli opinion is that there is majority support for expelling the people of Gaza. We know that there is majority support, for and annexation and
that's
resettlement
despite
of
the
the West Bank.
protests we've seen this week from Israeli family hostages. You say there's majority
so
support.
there are protests, and while there is strong support for ending the war to bring back the hostages, there isn't strong support for allowing the Palestinians a state. That's where the political centre of gravity is. So if you want to overcome that, create a different incentive for Netanyahu and his cabinet, there has to be some kind of punitive consequences for Israel.
Totally on point there. Like on the first point she talked about with regards to the sell-off of land in the West Bank, they would use cynically in America, like American Jewish cultural centers or synagogues, whatever, to essentially commit international crimes, selling off of other people's land. And this was very cynically done because obviously protests sprung up and it was, you're protesting synagogue. No, there's war crimes, there's international crimes happening in the synagogue right there. The building that it takes place in is completely irrelevant to this story. The point is that an international crime is being committed and it must be opposed, right? It absolutely has to be opposed. And when it comes to, again, Israeli opinion, people always bring about, the Israelis want a ceasefire. Yeah, they want a ceasefire because there's like 30 hostages left alive that they want home, some of which are prisoners of war. As for the lives of the potentially hundreds of thousands of Gazans, definitely the hundreds of thousands who are at risk of starvation, the ones who are potentially buried under the rubble, I mean, they actually all support ethnic cleansing, these people in Israel, right? This society is not one that has any amount of empathy for the existence of the Palestinian people. And again, you can't get these people to see sense in a humanitarian way, right? It reminds me that in the Simpsons movie, where Mr. Burns is like, we want to do this thing. And the response is, well, no, why don't you look into your heart? Smithers is behind going, no, you can't get him to see reason. You cannot get them to have a humanitarian concern here. You have to look at what's in their interest and you have to hold them accountable and say, you don't get what you want. You don't get what you want. We are going to respond with, as was pointed out, punitive consequences. There has to be consequences for these people because all they understand is their own material interest. And you cannot reason with people. You cannot reason with a population such as what we've seen with the priming of the Israeli population against Palestinians, right? When they don't actually have a moral concern that's there. It has no moral concern, so it cannot be reasoned with. Dalia, what do you make of those clips we just saw there today?
Yeah, I mean, I always find it so unbelievably chilling, even though we've spent 2 years watching this, but just watching like Western journalists in studios just so casually discussing like the uprooting and displacing of like 2 million people. Like, but this is just one opinion. What do you think? And I'm like, I think that is barbaric and insane. And I don't know how you can't see that. And I feel like I'm in some kind of twilight zone where that question even has to be asked. But I think this question of, what happens when the war ends, which obviously a lot of the focus is going on, and we're building a consensus really amongst most people, not within Israel necessarily, but around the world, that this war must end. But when I speak to Palestinians, both those who are in Gaza, those who are not in Gaza, they always talk about about the idea of the day that the war ends with kind of a bit of trepidation. And the reason that they do is because, as you said, Helene, as Ash, I think, said in that clip, they know that if they end up being displaced, they won't be able to return. But another word that they are very scared of, rightfully so, is this term reconstruction. The reason that they are scared of that term is because if done on the terms of the Tony Blair Institute, Trump, Jared Kushner, reconstruction simply means the continuation and completion of the genocide. Because in order to build Trump and Jared Kushner's vision of a post-war reconstruction within Gaza, in order to have those skyscrapers, the Gaza Riviera, hotels, all of this, you have to rip up all of the olive trees and all of the things that represent the Palestinian relationship to the land. And you have to remove any population that might get in the way of that vision. And they have a very genuine concern that when the war ends and, initiatives around the reconstruction plan begin to be proposed, people will take their eye off the ball, and people won't understand that reconstruction means recolonization. And what they call for is that when it comes to reconstruction, it's very important that the people in Gaza have control and sovereignty over what that reconstruction looks like. So why Tony Blair? I mean, you and I can look at this and say, who on earth would want Tony Blair's advice on what to do in the Middle East? Surely, anyone in their right mind will see that a lot of the issues in the Middle East, not particularly to do with Palestine, which goes much further back, but a lot of the issues in the Middle East that we see now can be traced back to the war in Iraq, which, was led by Bush and Tony Blair. Who in their right mind would want him back in the region? And it's because he's kind of the perfect guy for the Gaza reconstruction as recolonization plan. His expertise is in how to get away with war crimes and put a nice shiny surface on it, how to create a PR campaign that will allow you to get away with war crimes scot-free. He is an expert in how do you destroy a population in order to extract and steal their resources for their own gain. That is what he did in Iraq. He got away with leading an illegal war, with lying in order to get away with doing that illegal war, and he secured exactly what he wanted from it. The US and the UK now have control over Iraq's oil reserves. He got away with it, and he is making absolute bank on the speaking circuit as a result. So the fact that he is being roped into these incredibly extractive, exploitative, and frankly genocidal reconstruction plans is actually perfectly in line with his skill set. He has the perfect CV for it. So whilst the reason it doesn't make sense to you and I is because you and I want the Palestinians to have sovereignty and want the Palestinians to be able to live in a way that they define for themselves. But that is not what the people in power in Israel and the US want. That is not a goal that they share.